Okay, this is David Cadwell. This is Cornwall, Connecticut on July 11th, 2017. And we are talking about his experiences in the Vietnam War. So, as is typical of these sorts of interviews, I want to start off with the basic questions. Why did you decide to go to Vietnam?
Because the government issued me number 50 in the draft lottery, and that it certainly swept me up in the in the draft, and so it was sort of out of my hands.
Hmm. And then I understand you were a medic, so why did you decide to become a medic as opposed to play some other role?
Again, you don't have a whole lot of deciding to do, but in my personal case, I was a conscientious objector,
Uh-huh.
and anybody in the medical field is considered a non-combatant.
Oh, okay.
And so I was willing to serve, so they didn't give me a hard time there.
Okay.
And I frankly was set to be a physical therapist assistant
Hmm.
because I had worked as an athletic trainer in high school,
Huh.
and in everyone in any medical field is required to take the 10-week basic medic class.
Mhm.
So if you're going to be a lab technician or an x-ray technician, you got to do the 10 weeks, and then you go on to your advanced training and everything. So I was in the middle of that 10-week class when President Nixon decided to invade Cambodia,
Mhm.
and everybody's orders were like, okay, we're sending you all Vietnam. So,
Mhm.
so much for your advanced training. This is all the training you're getting. We're sending you there.
Mhm.
So I got swept up in history.
And well, speaking of history, I'm glad you ended that because my next question is, what were the years? Do you remember the years and dates that you served?
I do. I would have been there. Uh, I would have showed up in Vietnam in the summer of 1970. So I'm guessing this time of year
Mm-hmm.
I would have shown up there. And then I got out in April of 72
Mm-hmm.
because, as insane as this might sound, I volunteered to stay there.
Mm-hmm.
My first assignment was with the infantry,
Mm-hmm.
and everyone had to do a year,
Mm-hmm.
and that's how it worked.
Right.
You showed up, and the clock was ticking, and you counted each day.
Right.
Everybody,
Right. Right.
that was just a count you kept
Right.
always. And after my year was up, the Army could have assigned me anywhere they wanted to send me.
Mm-hmm.
So I wanted a bit of control on that, and I did want a hospital experience. Again, something I wouldn't have been able to dictate. They could have assigned me anywhere
Right.
to do anything. And so the hospital that I sent my casualties to, I went there, met with the first sergeant, and said, "Hey, I would love to work here." And he signed me up and extended my tour for 6 months. And then just logistically, it didn't make sense for the Army to then reassign me after that period of time, which meant I got out early.
Uh-huh.
So there was a method to my madness.
Oh, okay.
And you're considered in a combat zone.
Right.
Even though I worked on the largest Army base outside of the United States, I had
Yeah.
my own bunk, and
Yeah.
we had a swimming pool, and the
Yeah.
Bob Hope show came, and all that. So you had all the amenities where, just weeks earlier, I was carrying all my food and water and
Yeah.
stomping through the jungle. So
Yeah. And what was the name of the hospital and the base, if you can tell?
it was the 24th Evacuation Hospital in Long Binh, Vietnam.
Okay. Okay. And what was the relationship between you as a medic and the other members of your unit or platoon? Can you just talk in general
good
terms
question,
about
yeah.
how you got along with the other guys, or what you did when you weren't fighting?
Sure, well, I never fought.
Right, yeah. Or when the unit wasn't engaged, I should
was
say, yes.
I was a bit of a curiosity being out there without a weapon.
Right, yeah.
But it never given a hard time, and it, in fact, would have been many times. Guys would have a pistol or say, "Come on, Doc, you should carry this," and I was like, "Nah, I'll shoot myself. I'll screw something up." So that's a great question, Jim, because the infantry trains as a unit, and so they're a bunch of guys who've done all their training and everything. And as a medic, I got my training, but then you're assigned to one of these units, and you're considered attached personnel. That's the expression they use.
Right.
And if I ever write a book, that will be the title of my book of attached personnel. And but there was always a medic present. So I've never talked to other medics about this. I wonder if they have the. Anyway, Bob Martolucci was the guy whose place I took. I've never seen Bob ever again,
Right.
and that's we're now approaching 50 years ago, and his name is still part of my brain.
Right.
And Fred Trevino took my place.
Right.
8 months later when I left the bush. So there's always in that platoon and Alpha Company of the 1st Cavalry Division, there's going to be a medic, and you're attached. But you were instantly part of the group.
I see.
And because we all depended on each other.
Right.
The Band of Brothers expression's an accurate one.
Right.
You live every day together. So much of your day it's just a routine.
Right.
And actually it can be pretty boring. And there's that expression of hurry up and wait.
Right.
So applies to the experience there. And it's interesting because since we talked last, I actually talked to a counselor with the VA, and she explained to me how terribly stressful that is. And I'd never thought of it that way.
Right.
I just thought, well, it just is.
Yeah.
And once she pointed that out, and then I got thinking about it, boy, she's not kidding. It really is that whole. You don't have control of your life.
Right. The lack of control.
Yeah. You're just being, kind of a pawn being shoved around. So I got along great with these guys. They were all my pals, and you get to know every one of them because you have nothing else to do. Play a lot of cards.
Right.
And I would have daily contact with everybody in the platoon because we took malaria medication. And it was my job to hand out that pill on a daily basis. And on Sundays, you took another even larger pill once a week. And that would always be a distinguishing, when I handed them both pills, always was, it's Sunday? Because again, we had no perception whatsoever of time.
Right.
What day is it? Or what date is it?
One question I have for you is, as a conscious objector, did some of the other soldiers look down upon you as someone who wasn't doing his full duty, or weak, or unpatriotic?
On the contrary, never. I never had that, and I think it would be offset by admiration of, hey, you got your beliefs, and it really wasn't. They had their job to do,
right?
And I'd be quick to point out, which would you rather me carry, medical supplies or ammunition? You're carrying all the ammunition. You do that.
Yeah.
So I was
good
never.
to hear.
And Jim, got down for me. That was the basic understanding I knew going into it of the whole point of the training is your buddy is counting on you.
Right,
and
right,
you're not going to let him down, are you?
Right,
that's what you're there for. It's not you. It's them. They're counting on you.
Right.
It's like, oh man, better not have them do that about me because I'm not sure how dependable I could be under to shoot somebody.
Right.
Now, if it's hey, patch that guy up, then I'm your guy.
Right.
So that I knew I could do. So it was just it was the best use of my.
It's interesting. It's almost like that old biblical phrase of the 5 fingers of the hand, that everybody has their role and everybody understands the importance of the role.
Right.
And the hand, of course, couldn't operate without the 5 fingers, which are very different, but yet they're part of the same. They're part of the same unit.
Sure.
One thing too, with regard to the soldiers that you, well, let's say in your unit or platoon, were they at all sort of animated by a sense of, anti-communism? We have to stop communism in Southeast Asia, or was it a sense of duty to country, I need to serve because John Kennedy said, "Ask not what your country can do for you, what you can do for your country," or other motivations. Can you talk a little bit about the motivations of the people in your platoon for serving?
Well, just so we distinguish, if we're going to break down that way, the typical guy I saw were other considered enlisted men as opposed to officers.
Right, right.
The guys who tell you what to do.
Right.
So when we're just looking at those guys, they were motivated by, I'm guessing, pretty much my motivation as well. You were drafted.
Right, right.
So you were set there. There were very, very few guys who said, "Yeah, I'll volunteer
Right,
to be
right,
here."
right. Okay.
Well, there were.
Yeah.
They were. They had images
Yeah.
of those high ideals.
Yeah.
For the most part, we
Yeah.
were drafted, and you were doing. You didn't have the sense to go to Canada or
Right.
motivation or whatever to seek something otherwise.
Right.
So no, I mean, I knew one officer specifically who always referred to, let's go kill communist soldiers.
Mm-hmm.
He was
Right,
he
right.
was really dedicated
Right, okay.
to this.
Yeah.
That he was the rare exception.
Right. The outlier, you might say.
Totally
sort of.
the
Right,
outlier.
Right. Huh. Interesting.
Very much the character that
Yeah.
Robert Duvall played in Apocalypse
Right,
Now.
right.
That guy, who I love that smell of napalm in the morning. It smells
Right.
like victory.
Right. Right. right.
Captain Smith, that was that guy.
Right. Right. Right.
So, and the other, just in general, the fact that all these guys came from America. I mean, we came from all over the place.
Right.
So that you're thrown together, and
Right.
racial divides and things like that are nonsensical.
Right. Huh. Interesting.
You're counting on each other. So
Right.
kind of what that's sort of stupid to
Right.
maintain anything
Right.
like that.
So the next question sort of comes from the fact that just from my own experience and reading, it seems like I know more about the early years of the war, U.S. troops sent in 1965, withdrawn in 73, than the latter years of the war. This the veterans that I met and the reading that I've done. So I want to ask you a question with regard to the fact that you served at the end of the war. I think you're the only person I know that served near the end, I should say, near the end of the war. So was there a certain sense, because you served at the end of the war, that soldiers, as actually John Kerry ran for president back in 2004, said, no one wants to be the last man to die for a lost cause. And that was why John Kerry, was organized, one of the organizers of Vietnam Veterans Against the War, and became an anti-war protester. So because you served at the end there, was that sort of fear or sense of, I don't know, you could say disgust that, I'm going to be the last person to die for what's a lost cause by 1970. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Absolutely, and that's quite accurate. And we sort of jokingly said, we don't go on search and destroy missions. We go on search and avoid ones.
Right. Okay.
We
Yeah.
think they're that way. Well, let's go that way.
Right. I see.
Who wants to stir it up if you don't have to? And there was a whole actual policy of Vietnamization.
Right. Sure. Exactly.
Where we're handing it back to them.
Yeah.
Gosh, you get right down to it, pretty much what our Iraq policy's been for the
Right.
past number of years.
Right,
If,
right, yeah.
Let's go train those guys. They'll do it. So that the handwriting was on the wall.
Right,
That we're giving this back to them. So yeah, that really, and I have no basis of comparison. I was there for the time I was.
Right. Exactly.
but
Yeah.
Jim, I'm just like you of your research and everything. And there were a few guys that were on their second tour, and would tell the stories. Oh, you guys haven't made it. Was so much
Right. Of
worse
course.
back
Yeah.
in '68 and all that. Now, again, the boredom factor is still the overwhelming. That dominates. It certainly dominated my experience. It's not. A movie has to be entertaining.
Right,
So it's
right.
gonna pluck true stories that
Right,
actually
right.
happened. The fact they happen at the same guy all at that same time is
Yeah.
just beyond preposterous.
Right.
But they happened
Right,
as
right.
single events.
Right.
There was no question of hey, we're getting out of here, so who wants to be the last one to go?
Right, right.
Boy, that totally begs the question. There must be somebody on the record who was that guy.
Well, actually, I was going to ask this question later in the interview, but I'll ask it now.
Yeah.
I just was at the Vietnam Veterans Memorial. I've been there many times, but I led a study tour of teachers from West Virginia secondary schools and high schools to Washington, D.C., and we made a quick stop at the Vietnam Veterans Memorial. A number of them had never seen the memorial before. And the memorial lists the names of the first U.S. soldier casualty.
Oh, that's right. It's
Going back to
chronological.
1959 and then all the way to 1970, well, 1973 or 1975. The U.S. soldiers were officially pulled out in 1973, but I think there might have been soldiers, a few units left there for stabilization purposes
Right.
into 74 or 75. And obviously there was people at the embassy and other officials. So according to the Vietnam Veterans Memorial Wall, there is a name that's the last name at the end of that list, and it does sort of make you think about what those people were thinking. Those names at the bottom of that list in 1974 it probably is. What were they thinking being in Vietnam?
Well, and as I'm always quick to point out, I mean, for whatever reason, our minds go, oh, he was the last one, kind of thing.
Right.
Well, what about the second to last one, the third to last?
Right,
The
yeah.
15th to last.
Yeah, exactly.
They're not left dead.
Right,
And,
yeah.
and I mean that. I mean, you can look at any war and ask that question
Yeah,
of
yeah.
why
Yeah.
kind of thing. But boy, Vietnam, I think of American involvements, that one has the biggest question mark.
Right, yeah.
What in the heck did we do that for?
Right. Yeah, no, exactly. Okay, so this ends part one of the interview with Dave Caldwell, but we'll start part two shortly.